The other day I was going down this very road actually, and saw a sign on a post, and it was about a missing dog, and it had exactly that on the sign: dog missing, a phone number, and a little message that said, "We miss him." And it's bloody near broke my heart, to be honest, you know, because while it's sad enough that a dog goes missing, that kind of plea that we miss him is really heart-wrenching when you think about it, given that to many people a dog is very much a part of the family. Now, I'm coming across that intersection right now. I'll be interested to see whether that sign is still there, and it looks as if it is. But I captured some footage of it the other day. Now, if you're not a dog person, it may not mean much to you, and lots of people aren't. You know, they might even have a dog, but they're not necessarily dog people. You know, the poor old thing sleeps outside, doesn't have much to do with the family, even though the dog thinks that it's part of the pack. The family don't think so. But I have to say that you'll never get a better friend than your dog. They'll never cheat on you. They'll never leave you unless, in the case of that sign, possibly the dog's got a fright and has run away, or because it's a little French bulldog, possibly stolen. And they don't give you just the best years of their life, they give you all the years of your life. There is no one person who can do that. So, on the subject of dogs, I wanted to give you an update on mine, and I don't know whether you can see her in the back there, but she's in the back seat at the moment. Yesterday I dropped her off and then picked her up again from the animal hospital for a dressing change, and that was for surgery that she'd had last Wednesday, which is the last to date in a long series of surgeries and or procedures and or attendances at the animal hospital. As you know, she's been going every week for dressing changes, and mostly for the last several months she's just been wearing a splint. So it's like a fiberglass splint that's wrapped up in bandages on both legs to give her support in her legs. Now, if you go back to September of last year, you'll recall that she was wearing a pair of socks because she had torn a tendon in her right leg, and I'm not sure at that point whether she'd had the surgery to repair the tendon or not. But she had support on that leg, but as a result was putting all of her weight onto her left leg, and as a result she ended up tearing the tendon in her left leg too. Quite why that might happen in both or even either is unknown. You know, could it be genetics, could it be age, could it be activity? Don't really know, but that's what happened. And so over the next few months she had a tendon repair on her right leg, then a tendon repair on her left leg, then a failure of the first repair, then a second repair of the tendon in her right leg, and then a bunch of bolts, nuts and screws which I went through in a video I made at Lake Warralong, and I'll just play that for you because that'll be easier than me going back through it all over again. So that issue started with a tear on the right Achilles tendon, and it was repaired, and it had torn at the muscle end, so it was reattached at the muscle, and then her leg was put into a splint. Because she transferred her weight to her left leg, then she started to stress that, and it started to sag as well. So as you saw in that photograph, she had both legs bandaged and splints on both legs. Now, as time went by, naturally we couldn't continue to have a bandage in with splints the whole time, so we got these leg, I suppose, supports. They're called tarsal supports, and I'll show you a picture of those. And so we removed all of the dressings and fitted those, and they actually were not nearly enough to support her weight, and she ended up collapsing pretty well flat-footed on both legs again. So in other words, the left leg failed completely, as in the tendon, which had not been repaired, but it failed, and then also the repair failed, so she ended up walking flat-footed on both legs, and has had to then go back into hospital and get a screw inserted in her ankles that go through into the shin bone. Now, first of all, this one of these was put in and it snapped, believe it or not, and so that failed, and then that was replaced with a second screw, and it's now pulled out of the bone, which meant that she basically had the sharp end of a screw waving about inside her leg, poor love. Now, yesterday she had an operation on her left leg, and they've now put in a bolt with a nut on the end that goes from the ankle through into the shin bone, with a nut on the end to hold it in place. So theoretically that should hold it quite rigid. But the concern then is, if you make a hole in the bone big enough to take a bolt with a nut on the end, do you then weaken the bone? And do you then have problems if anything's going to break? It's no longer the screw or the bolt because there's a nut on the end of it, but the bone itself. Now, for the months following that, she was going in for weekly dressing changes, and we tried a couple of different external braces, which once again I went through in a video, and I think I was actually sitting in the back of the Troopy when I made this one, but I'll show you a bit of that too. I just wanted to have a chat about this little lovey here, because as you can see, she's still got these socks on here. Now, at the moment, she's still got a bolt in this left leg here, and she's got a splint on the right leg here. And we're taking her in every Tuesday and Friday, so twice a week for bandage dressing changes. And when they wash the wound and apply some antiseptic ointment, and then redress, because she did have an infection. And also on the left hand side here, where that bolt goes through, there's an incision where they access the nut and then the bolt end, and there was some weeping from that. So but she's on the mend, as you can see. She's getting around quite well, albeit stiff-legged because of these splints and stuff, but she's in good spirits. Is there anything you want to say a few words to anyone, love? Oh, you can't jump down. You can't jump down. You can't. And then pretty well all hope was given up in terms of external braces. We explored potentially getting a custom brace But the problem with custom braces is that they were specific to each side, which meant that you'd need two, not just one, which you'd swap from side to side. And they were pretty pricey at around about, I don't know, $2,000 and $2,500 each, with no guarantee that they'd be any better than the non-custom or generic ones. And so we shelved that idea for a while until it was determined that we needed to do something, given that her legs were getting weaker because they were supported, so she didn't really need the muscle. And also that her bones were losing density. Once again, given that if you don't need the bone, well, why have it? And equally, because her legs were always wrapped in bandages and never got air, she was getting quite a few pressure sores and her skin was thinning. So we were just getting worse for the poor love. And while she herself was very happy, it's difficult for us to be happy when we know that we needed to take some steps. So steps we did, and we made the decision, with the advice of the vet, to fuse the bones in her ankle. And by that I mean basically lock them into a position so that the muscle to support them wasn't required. Now, it doesn't mean that she doesn't need a muscle to use the leg, rather that there's no stress on the tendon, and therefore the risk of the tendon just tearing and or stretching again. But that in itself comes with some qualifications, given that the bones were never meant to be fused. Therefore, a broken bone can heal relatively quickly, given that all it's really doing is bonding itself back to the same point where it broke. But in her case, you were sticking two bones together like so, and they were never meant to be stuck together in such a way. And so I believe they have to kind of shave the surfaces of them and stick them together, and then a plate was put in, which was an angled plate, and I'll show you a picture of that, to support the ankle in a natural angle until such time as the bones fuse. So that was the operation that she had last Wednesday. That's what she had the dressing change for yesterday, and she's got another one booked for tomorrow, Wednesday. And along with a painkiller, which she gets nightly, and antibiotics, which she's having twice a day, because there's a huge risk of infection when you open up a leg and particularly stick in a plate like that. And the road to recovery is still quite lengthy, so there'll still be dressing changes. We're probably talking months before we see a good result. But ultimately, I think what we're going to see is one good leg, even if the left leg at this stage is still just supported by splints. So maybe the next operation is in fact on the left leg. Now, it does mean she'll be walking around with stiff legs, but I reckon that has to be an improvement on walking around with bandaged legs, which are slowly weakening. So that's the update, and if you're not that dog person we were talking about, then you probably don't care at all. But if you are, well, let's give the little love our thoughts and our prayers. Thanks for watching.